Welcome to the Start Here podcast for web development. I'm Keith Monahan.
And I'm Dane Miller.
And we're here to show you how to build a career in web dev. You can find us online at starthere.fm.
Hey, Keith. How's it going?
Good. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, man.
Cool. We're recording this on January 1st, so Today's the day.
Yep, today's the day, and we just wanted to, say, hope everybody had a good 2014, everybody listening, and, we hope you have a great 2015 as well. And this episode, we hope, is going to help you sort of facilitate your web development education in 2015. We have some great tips and things that we want to talk about.
For sure. First, we want to talk about or mention Whitney. She left a comment on the website, and it's totally applicable. So, among other things, she said, I'm moving into the web development space because I feel the grass is greener on the text editor side. I love the excitement, imagination, and creativity that comes with bringing ideas to life. I've had a natural curiosity for web development that I believe is turning into a personal passion. So, I'm continuing to move forward with it. I'd say I'm a black belt beginner. My question, so along the way, when did you guys know that you were ready to put your name in the hat for full-time employment? Thanks for all you're doing. So thanks, Whitney, for leaving a comment. We appreciate that. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about. How do you know when you're ready? It is so hard to know.
I think it's the toughest question, right? As a self-learned, self-educated web developer, the toughest choice is when do I cross the line and move to being able to charge for my work? When do I know enough? When do I have enough experience to be able to take money from other people? Taking money from other people for a service is very personal. And even for independent writers and bloggers, they often have trouble being able to charge for their services. And so I totally agree. This is a tough topic.
Yeah, and not only just freelancing, but when can you go start interviewing?
That too, yeah, for sure.
It's tough. So we had a couple recommendations. I don't know about you, Dane, but I definitely struggled with this. And
same here.
I think I waited too long. I've mentioned I took 2 years to get into web development, and there were reasons I wanted to be sure. I have a family, I needed to make sure I could provide for them. But I definitely could have gotten in earlier. And one thing that would have helped me is if I put my code in front of other people, because I was always unsure about what I was doing.
Yeah.
I could build it and it worked, right? I could build an application or a website and it worked. But then I'm like, well, but is it good? Like, is the code good? Or like, am I doing this right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the name of the game is sanity checking yourself for this. So you're questioning, Whitney's questioning whether her code is good enough or whether her skill set is good enough. And one way to tell really quickly is to get an experienced member of the web development community to just review it. Right. I recommended to her that she build a little application and then get it in front of some people. We do website reviews at starthere.fm/review. You can submit your reviews and then you can see them at starthere.fm/reviews, plural. You could do that, submit them to us, or just have a friend, perhaps somebody on Twitter you reach out to. Just get it in front of other people. I agree. I think that's the name of the game.
Yeah. And something we found, and I think we've talked about recently, is a website. It's called freecodecamp.com. Yeah. And basically you build something with somebody else. It's called pair programming, where you're literally building something together. And that is huge because then you can bounce ideas off each other and talk about how to build something. I think that experience, getting your code in front of somebody else and having it reviewed, will give you a good idea about where you're at, and it will build your confidence if you're ready.
Yeah, and there's another resource. So this is a paid resource, and we often don't like to plug paid resources because we're very keen on keeping budgets low for you guys that are learning. But I will say the pair coding is super huge, and being able to watch other people pair code is just as good, I think, as being able to pair code with somebody. So there's places like lynda.com as well as peepcode.com, which got bought by Pluralsight. So you'll now go to pluralsight.com. Those both offer paid subscriptions for videos on web development, and they have a series of like pair coding. So there's certain series on both of those sites you can go to actually watch two people pair code together. And it's really cool. And we'll include a link to that in the show notes. And I honestly have used that a ton when I'm doing Rails stuff, just to sort of see how other people think. Also, you do need to understand how others think in the space that you're in. I mean, when you're able to validate that your thinking is on the same level as a more intermediate member of the community, then I think you're ready to sort of enter the job market.
Yeah. It's really hard to know where you're at, but having other people look at it is probably one of the best ways. The other way, and so that was kind of the first thing, is peer review. Yep. The other thing is that can you build something, a project, from some sort of a spec document, even if it's a personal project, and you just outline some criteria. This application should do this, this, and this. So, and then can you take that and then build from it without doing more or less, because you'll most likely receive some sort of documentation or requirements that you'll need to build from in your job. And so it's important to be able to do that. So can you build it from start to finish, front end, back end, or whatever your focus is?
And I think it allow me to elaborate on that a little bit. I think it's more so that you use a spec document than that you build something randomly. So the point of this objective to build something from a spec document is that you are able to judge your skills based on an objective as you can measure as possible, right? Like it's impossible to be objective because you're judging yourself. So you're obviously subjective. But if you are able to write down what you want to build beforehand and then look at it and judge whether or not you built that at the end, I think it's pretty close to being objective. And then also you don't run into scope creep as well, right? Where you're just constantly building and going and going. You need some kind of stopping point so that you can look back and evaluate your education.
Yeah. So if you create your own spec document, then you need to stick to it.
Yep. And thanks for that comment, Whitney. That was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So this kind of got us thinking about web development in general and kind of the lifestyle and like the process of learning. And the next thing we wanted to hit on was just that as you're learning, you have to remember it's a commitment and it's kind of like a part-time job.
This is a theme that we've had in a couple episodes throughout the show. If you notice that, we just constantly want to remind people that as they go about their learning process, that it is a commitment and it can be like a part-time job where it does require 10, 20 hours a week after you get home from your day job. And that can be a struggle. So, we do like to mention this every now and then. Right.
And so what that means is that, well, I guess it depends on your situation right now. If you're single, it means that you just need to commit to yourself that you're going to do this. And that means you won't be able to do some activities that you had previously been able to, whether that's going out with friends in the evenings all the time or hanging out, with roommates, or maybe that's binge watching on Netflix. I don't know. You won't be able to do some of those things, and you just have to commit to the job, right? And the way that you can do that is you keep your eye on the ball. You keep your eye on the end goal. And what's cool is that you can know the end goal. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. You should set that goal for yourself and know that this isn't going to be forever. I'm just taking this time, foregoing some of these things so that I can have a better career, a better life later on. Now, the other scenario is if you have a family, and then it involves a conversation with your family, with your significant other, where you have to come to an understanding of basically the same things, that you will have to forego some things, and those might be spending time with your family. That's difficult and that's hard. And I went through that as I was learning, and I came back to it, multiple times. We came back to, this is tough. We don't get to spend as much time together as we need to. What are we going to do? And it always came back to the end goal. And the end goal was that I was going to have a better job. We're going to have a better lifestyle. And we really do want that. And so, yes, it sucks right now.
But like, just to jump in, you do currently have a better lifestyle and you do currently have a better job. Like, you're living all those things that you and your wife discussed and had to keep coming back to.
Yeah. So it was totally worth it.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard having those conversations.
Yeah.
But it's just something that you have to do. And even if you're not comfortable doing it, it needs to be said. It's got to be out there. And so you want to, obviously best case scenario is that you want to have, full understanding and commitment from your family for doing this, for going out to this, because it is going to take time away from them.
I agree. I did it a little bit differently than you. As listeners know who listened to episode 1, I perhaps jumped in too quickly, whereas maybe you took too long. So I think we have both sides of the spectrum, but the honest truth is, it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you were on looking back. You always need to just focus on setting goals and making sure that you do the commitment that you set for yourself. So if you take, if you want to spend 10 hours a week or 1 hour a day or whatever learning, you need to actually do that and follow through, and you'll achieve that result.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was really fun and encouraging when I set goals to then see them accomplished.
How do you set goals for learning web development? What was one of your goals, just as like a little bit of insight into your life? What was one of the goals you set?
Yeah. So originally it was always 2 years out.
Okay.
In 2 years, I wanted to have a job in web development. That was always the goal. I don't remember setting some specific goals for how often I spent time learning. It's something that I liked doing and wanted to do, and so I just did it. And it ended up being about 2 to 3 hours, like 4 or 5 nights a week.
Yeah. And it came about organically, it sounds like, right? Just because you were so passionate about it?
Right.
And I think that's a common theme. I guess the listeners can tell us, though, if you guys really are interested in a show about goals, definitely let us know. You can tweet at us at StartHereFM and let us know. I'm not sure if it's super relevant, but I didn't use goals personally because I jumped in too quick, like I said. And it sounds like, Keith, you did it organically based on your passion, but we do have some thoughts on goals if you guys want to hear. So what was the next topic we wanted to jump into here?
Well, when you're in web development, there are all sorts of ups and downs. There are things that you can do to manage the downs, like the down part of it, right? So what I'm getting at is that when you're coding and you hit a brick wall, something should be working and it's not working and you can't figure it out. And it is so frustrating.
Yeah.
And you can almost get depressed.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. And what do you do?
Well, first I should say this applies to people learning too. If you're learning something and you just can't grasp it, and I know all of us that have went to college have that experience of sitting in class, maybe a math class, and you just can't quite grasp what the professor's teaching or what your high school teacher was teaching, and it's tough. And the same thing happens when you're self-educated in web development. You'll read a code block and you'll try to implement it. You just don't quite understand it. And honestly, it's really frustrating because it's just our very nature to almost want everything to come easy to us. But when they don't, it can be depressing or upsetting. And Keith, what are some of the things that you've done when you get in that state to get yourself out of it?
For sure. So first thing when I'm getting frustrated is I'll just get up and just go and take a walk or just take a quick break. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is.
Do you do Pomodoro? Do you focus in certain set amounts of time so that you can then take specific breaks, or do you just take a break like whenever you feel stressed?
I'm not sure what Pomodoro is, but yeah, I totally I wing it. And I think that's because I have a pretty good tap on my psyche and my body. I kind of know when I need a break. And so I'll just take a break. But if that's not for everybody, you could just set some time, more of a structured deal. So yeah, absolutely. If I'm feeling frustrated, I'll just take a quick break, get up, walk around. It gets your blood flowing, and that's fantastic. If you have an opportunity to stand while you develop, that's also helpful. And
the quick caveat on walking, it's been shown that if you take a 7 to 10 minute walk in the morning after having a cup of coffee, it basically ignites your brain in an unbelievable way. So like all these neurons that typically don't fire during a day will fire when you're on a walk, even if you don't have coffee, even if it's not the morning, but especially if you do it in the morning. And they also did the study after people had coffee. So it's like you can actually very scientifically do your walk to where it doesn't have to be an hour-long walk. It doesn't have to be crazy, just a couple minutes, and you can actually come back to your computer and focus with a greater attention span, greater focus time and more ability to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Dane, you've heard of the 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has another book called The 4-Hour Body.
That's where I got that tip.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So he has another tip where, and it doesn't apply exactly, but I think it does. It could help. If you're going to go, this is kind of random, if you're going to go eat a big meal and you know it's going to be a big meal, you can jumpstart your metabolism by going to a bathroom or into a back room or somewhere and doing 20 squats.
Yeah.
20 squats will get your body moving. It gets your blood going. It gets your heart rate up a little bit, and it will increase your metabolism. And so you could even do something like that in the morning as well, and just kind of, it's not a full exercise, of course, but it gives you some of those benefits for starting your day.
Right. And the point is, that you're going to be doing something later, so do something now that helps you later. Right. So that's the whole point of that tip from Tim, right? Is that you're going to be eating a lot. So do something now that helps your digestion or metabolism later. And the same for us as self-educated web developers. We know we have to sit down and focus for an hour. So let's get ourselves in the right mind state to do that physically and mentally before we sit down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So you also mentioned a minute ago, Keith, standing desks before we sort of got off topic on that tangent from Tim. And I will say I've experimented with standing desks a bit, and I've always seen and read the articles that sitting is killing us, standing is the best. And I've read blog posts of people that have experimented with standing desks that love it and some that hate it. And honestly, I just had to try it for myself. So what I did was I have at my day job, previously, I just had a cardboard box and I would put it on the table, put the laptop on the cardboard box. And I found that it actually is really nice to stand every couple of hours for about 30 minutes. So what I would do is every couple of hours when I would start to get sort of in the zone so much that I could almost get a little sleepy. You know that zone that you get into where you're so frustrated from a bug or something that you're almost getting tired and you're mentally starting to go like lower and lower in energy. At that point, I would definitely jump up, put the box on the table and start working standing, and it completely changed my mind state. So I went from really low energy to totally fired up and ready to go. And I found that's actually the way it works. So, I mean, anytime I need a quick focus, I'll pop a box on the desk and stand. And even though it's not, the best thing ever, it's some cardboard box, it doesn't really matter. The point is you're doing what you got to do to get it done.
Right. And so the other big thing that helps me get through a problem is, and I don't know if everybody can do this, I would like to think that everyone can try, is to develop a curiosity for the problem. And whether that problem is you're learning a technology and you don't fully understand it, or you're actually in some code and it's not working right, just take a deep breath, go on the walk, and then come back and make a decision that you're curious, that you want to learn how to do this, learn how to figure it out. Sometimes just taking some perspective like that and deciding, there's this thing, I can't figure it out, but this is going to be really good to know. So let me figure it out, and then dive in with a fresh perspective. And sometimes that helps as well.
That, I agree. That coupled with a walk of choosing to be curious, coupled with a walk where you perhaps think about it, that can be really beneficial. And actually, I heard an interesting anecdote about being curious. There was a hedge fund manager that I listened to on a podcast who discussed how he did an experiment where for a week, he tried to change all of the frustrations that he had, which is applicable to us as web developers, to curiosity. So every time he felt frustrated, he basically said, for a week, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to be curious about everything. Literally, he was curious about every decision that everybody made. And that can be very taxing mentally to do that.
For sure.
But the point was, he came out of that experience completely changed. Like, he was just, the way he viewed the world was totally different, because he realized that he wasn't curious about the way that he viewed the world. Right. And as web developers, this is the same thing. Like, we get frustrated about a problem. Like Keith said, just get curious about it. View yourself being upset about it. Relax for a bit, go on a walk, come back, nail it. Like, that works so well.
Yeah. I guess that's something I did in college when I was faced with a subject that I didn't like at all. I had no interest in. I just made a decision that I was going to be curious about this. And so sometimes we can build up this anxiety or this, like a wall almost, for things that we're not interested in that will keep us from it. Yeah. And if you just decide, no, I want to learn more about that. And you literally have to tell yourself, like, no, this is interesting. I want to learn more about this.
Or you just say to yourself, like, I'm curious about that. Like, you don't have to be all in it, like you just described. I feel like you can just be like, what is the deal with that? What is the deal there?
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest tool that I used in college that helped me the most, is just knowing that no matter what subject, no matter what I'm faced with, I can just decide that I'm going to be curious about it and dive in. And that doesn't mean you have to embrace what you're learning. Some things I didn't agree with, and that's fine. That gives you perspective and character. Yeah. Anyway, I hope that helps some people. It certainly helped me.
One other thing that we wanted to touch on also in this New Year's episode, sort of looking forward, trying to help you guys in your web development education as we move forward, is you just have to understand your cadence as well. So throughout the day, you'll have lulls and you'll have high points, and you need to understand how you work personally. So if you're somebody that wakes up in the morning and you're totally fired up.
You're talking about energy level throughout the day?
Sort of. It's sort of about energy level. It's also sort of about like mental energy too. So,
Okay.
There's physical energy and then there's mental energy, and you need to find the point where there's the nexus between the both, and you need to basically embrace that, because that's a really good time for you to learn. So just to paint a picture, if I told somebody to learn something in web development and they spent a week on it and it was at the lull point of their day, it would probably not be very helpful. But if I told somebody to learn something in web development and I only gave them 2 days, but it was at like the nexus and they were at their highest peak energy mentally and physically, and they only spent like 20 minutes on it a day, I'm pretty confident that that person could understand it, because learning something is so much about just understanding your own mentality about it. It's almost like not so much learning the thing, it's learning how to learn in a way. And one of those tips is obviously like understand your energy. So that's kind of the point I'm making, is you'll understand that, some people are night people and some people are morning people. Just pick whichever one you are and totally go all in with your education in that time slot.
Right. And we would just like to say now that when you're learning web development, it is like Dane just said, it is about learning how to learn, because you will never have arrived. You will never know it all. You will never know most of it in everything, right? Because web development is so huge and it's always changing. And I don't know about you, Dane, but when I get into something and I don't know it, I get frustrated and I feel inferior because I don't know how to do something. And I've realized you just have to get over that, because there's always going to be stuff you don't know.
It's true.
So as you're learning web development, it can be really hard to figure out what you do need to know to get a job or to be good as a freelancer in a particular field, right? There's front end, there's back end, but there's also different languages, and sometimes different languages have different technologies that go along with them. And what set of skills do you need to get the job that you're looking for? Okay, so it helps to have a job in mind, and some of those skills, if you're a back end, might be, a core language, and then also understanding how to work with APIs and some other things. Don't just focus on the languages. Maybe it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but do some research. Maybe find out, are there skills that you could be learning around, those primary technologies that will help you beyond just technically doing the job.
That's a really good point. And I think a good way to think about that is, let's say you're a backend developer and you know Python, but one day you're asked to code up some sort of an algorithm. But perhaps your product manager doesn't call it an algorithm. He just wants you to figure out, use Python to come up with the quickest way to analyze the data that over the past couple months and come up with some kind of solution. Unfortunately, you have to use some kind of algorithm that perhaps you don't know and you never learned, right? And so as a self-educated web developer, algorithms and sort of the advanced math side of computer science is often something that we push off to the very end. We say, you know what? We're going to learn that at the very end, which is totally reasonable. I'm going to learn the Python syntax and how to actually code up a web page first. And that's totally reasonable, but I think it would do you some good to understand the basics of a lot of that stuff, so that when your product manager comes to you and says, can you do this? You say, you know what? I think I have a solution that might include a tool that's in my tool belt, and perhaps I don't know it 100%, but I at least know the name or the type of algorithm that I want to do, so I can go on Google and sort of look it up, right? Like, so the point is, you have knowledge of the area surrounding your skills,
and maybe not very deep knowledge. It could just be surface, but if you know about a technology that could help you, then even that is beneficial.
Yeah, and I like to envision it as like as a web developer, this is kind of strange, but as a web developer, you're basically an orb, and you have like a million little connections coming off, and those connections are to all the new types of technologies, all the new algorithms, all the everything, right? And so as a web developer, you almost kind of need to make sure that you have those connections and they aren't severed. When you start severing those connections and you're in a job, your manager will come to you with a problem or some kind of thing that he wants you to build, and you'll basically have a really tough time doing it because you're trying to hit the nail with the hammer that you already know of instead of the hammer that's appropriate. Right.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
you have to really keep all of the industry in mind. That doesn't have to be overwhelming as it sounds. I know that does sound kind of crazy that you have to understand everything. That's not really what we mean. We simply
it's more like keeping tabs on the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And we did discuss this in one episode where our tricks and tips to keep tabs on a large amount of data. And one of mine was to subscribe to a couple newsletters.
Right. And not only that, but also staying connected with a community of other web developers. And I did that by going to local meetups in my town here that were for web marketing and then like web design and web development and stuff. And that was cool because you got to rub shoulders and people would talk about new stuff and it just keeps you in the know.
And here's a good tip. If you want to learn about new stuff but don't actually want to go to meetups and meet people, just go to meetup.com and look up tech meetups in your area or in Los Angeles or New York in the big cities, and then look at what those meetups are on. Is there a meetup on Angular? Is there a meetup on Node.js? Is there a meetup on Emacs? Like all of these meetups are going to happen around topics that are like really hot. Right? Because people like to talk about it. So just take that topic and go and learn a little bit.
And sometimes you might even be able to find resources on Meetup without even, on those event pages.
Yeah,
that you can
totally.
get and learn more about. So another example of adding skills around your core language or competence would be on the front end to learn Photoshop. If you're building the front end HTML, CSS structures based on designs, most likely you're going to need to know Photoshop. Maybe you get the style guide for the website in a Photoshop file that you'll need to get in and like cut it up and pull assets out of. Or maybe you'll need to be able to optimize images. So that's another example of something that you can learn now that will benefit you later if you're in that field.
Yeah, totally.
So here's an interesting question, Dane. How do you become a web guy or gal without realizing it?
That's a really good question.
There's this idea, and we've talked about it, that you fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And it's so cliche, but it really is true. As you fake it, right, you start immersing yourselves in the communities, you start learning the lingo, and what you're doing is you're accumulating the culture and the knowledge, and you're through osmosis almost, you're absorbing this. And then eventually one day, you just are.
Yeah, I think the fact that most people think fake it till you make it is cliche is kind of stupid because it is the truest thing that has probably ever been said about self-education when it comes to a career. It's by far the best thing that you could possibly do. And, there's a lot of extrapolations on that. Like people will extrapolate that and say, oh, the reason fake it till you make it works is because the law of attraction. Like you mentally think you are something and then you get it. I don't really abide by some of those extrapolations. I just know for a fact, and I've seen many, many, many times over that fake it till you make it is 100% going to work for you. And I think the way that you become something without realizing it is just that. You literally decide to yourself at the beginning, year one, day zero, you decide, I'm going to be a web developer. Then you start learning, you go about your learning process. Then 2 years later, in your case, Keith, 2 years later, you wake up one day and you're like, holy crap, I am a web developer. Like I have an awesome job. And the funny thing is you don't necessarily get a parade. A parade doesn't come down the street the day that you get the job and you get told that you made it. Like nobody is ever going to tell you that you made it. Like, you're
not going to feel it either.
Yeah. You're not going to feel it. And take it from me. Like I worked at the White House in web development. I did not feel like I made it at that point. Like you do not feel like you made it no matter what, but you will wake up one day and you will feel like it. And you just don't really know where it comes from. It'll be a series of life events that cause it, but more so it's some kind of like internal thing that happens where you're like, oh wow, I'm a web developer now. Like that's super cool. And maybe it's the day that you quit your job, right? Like, so if you have another job, perhaps that is a life event that's very black and white. Like when I quit that job, I'm a web developer. And if that's the case for you, then that is awesome because you have a very black and white boundary there.
Right. Or if you're not doing freelance, maybe that's getting a job in web development.
Yeah, exactly. And like even though when you get a job, like, it sometimes doesn't feel like you made it because you feel like you aren't as educated as everybody else and you're still struggling. You're like, oh, I've got to learn so much to even be as good as like this one guy next to me at my job. I haven't yet made it. And that will continue. Like if that's how you feel and you're new to a job, like trust me, that will continue throughout your life. But again, I think you will just wake up one day and feel like you've achieved this thing as long as you keep at it.
Absolutely. And I would say part of that process for me was also interviewing for web development jobs. Okay. I got to a point where I was like, well, I'm close. I feel like I'm close. I could be ready here. So I just dove into the job market. I think this is what Whitney was saying is when do you start to dive in exactly? And I just looked for jobs that were around stuff that I already had learned or was learning, and then wrote a cover letter, sent my resume. Sometimes I didn't get any responses. Sometimes I got emails back. Sometimes I got a call back. I did multiple phone interviews. I did multiple second interviews, and had conversations with different people. And some of those were, one of them felt like a grilling.
Yeah.
And it was intense. It was actually intense. But you know what? I learned a lot about what people are looking for. And then I could go back and I could say, okay, these people, I wasn't quite what they were looking for because of XYZ, because I didn't know this or I didn't know this. And so you can use that job search process as a way to refine yourself. And then as you continue to look and you continue to learn as you're applying for jobs, you become who they're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really great point and a great way to say it, actually. Especially relevant to people in the job search. If you're in the job search phase of your career as a web developer, then definitely take what Keith just said to heart, because you will get declined a bunch. You will have to go to multiple interviews. If you're really lucky and you get the first interview that you ever go out for, then that's very rare. That's very rare. So don't be discouraged if you get declined a bunch and have to do this process up for a while. How long did it take you, by the way?
It was at least 6 months, but I had the luxury of having a full-time job as well.
Right. So you could take your time a little bit for sure.
And then it turns out the job that I have now, it didn't come to me through any of those interviewing processes. What it was a recommendation of a friend of a friend. And so the flip side of this is that you need to tell people that you are looking to be in the industry. Tell your friends, tell your family, hey, I'm learning to be a web developer. Or if you know anybody that needs a web developer, let me know. And so literally getting the word out can be an awesome networking opportunity.
Yeah. Over the holidays, I hope you were telling everybody that you want to be a web developer, right? So if you're in a career where you're trying to transition, I hope over the holidays when you're with family and friends and they ask how your work's going, I hope you told them, I'm trying to transition to web development, because they will probably say, oh, I know my friend who's trying to build a website, because everybody's trying to build a website for everything. And you are an immediate point of contact. When you become an immediate point of contact, then obviously you're a sort of tangential point of contact for that family member's friend. And it goes on and spreads, and eventually you'll get references. I imagine, Keith, before you got your first reference, you never understood how references worked. It seems so fictitious to people, when they're first starting freelancing, how references actually work, but it's really organic. And, you get one client or even one friend, or you do something pro bono and then you share it on Twitter, and, it's very organic. So you just have to take the process slowly and sort of methodically.
Sure, for sure. It doesn't happen overnight, usually. Well, I think that's our episode for today. We just want to encourage you guys to keep going, keep learning, keep building, build for other people. That's huge.
Yeah.
If I could go back in time and tell myself something, the one thing I would tell myself early on was to start building for people right away, as early as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge amount of experience you can gain from that.
Yep.
So you can find us online at starthere.fm. And as Dane mentioned, we do website reviews.
And feel free to use that website review submission as a way to evaluate your skill set. If you wanted to submit your website and tell us, hey, this is something I built just a couple weeks ago, or something that I'm using to test my skills, we'll definitely evaluate it as such. It's very different. It's very different than if you sent us your personal site. If you sent us a portfolio site or a personal site, we'll evaluate that within the context of a personal personal site or a portfolio site. But if you come to us and you just say, hey, look, I'm trying to evaluate some skills. Here is a little JavaScript app or a little PHP app. You put it on GitHub maybe. We'll totally help you guys out.
Yeah, so we've done a few other website reviews, and we just do like a screencast and then talk about it there. You can find those at starthere.fm/reviews, plural. We would love to answer any questions you have. You can find me at KeithMon, KeithMon. It's on Twitter, or you can email me, keith@starthere.fm.
And I'm at _DAIN. That's _Dane. And on Twitter, and you can email me at dane@starthere.fm.
So keep it going and have a great 2015.
Bye.
Bye.